Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday, the Leading Change episode this week with Armin Mandara. Hey Armin, welcome back.
Hey Vasco, thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. So we've heard quite a few stories from you that relate to change, some personal change, some team change. But today we're going to dive into the whole change process. So walk us through a change process you were involved with and, go through the steps, what was happening at that time. And as you go through that, highlight for us the tips, the tools, the tricks, and the techniques you learned back then that you still apply today.
Mm-hmm. Here I'm thinking of a change that we triggered in our company last year, and we rolled out earlier this year, and we're still in the process of making it reality. And it was about changing the career paths in our company for our roles and also for the Scrum Masters. And here I was directly involved in my role as Head of Scrum Masters for Austria. And to give you context how it worked in our company, we had career paths in place that are, let's say, a list of checkboxes, that things that you should accomplish in order to proceed in your levels. So we had some set of levels in place for juniors, professional, senior, Scrum Master, and so on. And the level you were in was tied to specific accomplishments, and they were a list of checkboxes, basically. For example, did you do a retrospective together with the client? Did you hold a training in our internal academy? Were you part of some pitch for pitching a project and so on? So depending on what you did, you would then grow in level or not. And we had that in place for some years, but we noticed a few flaws there. One thing was that some managers used it in a very much black or white kind of way. If you don't have this checkbox ticked, you will not grow in your level, which of course for some employees was frustrating. And also what we noticed is that growing in your career, growing as a professional, it felt like it's just you run after ticking some boxes. And that's not what the purpose of this thing was. And so triggered by one person from HR, we changed it completely. We went away from doing checkboxes to a skill-based career path. So every role, also us as a Scrum Master, had to identify what are the skills that are needed for that role. And then we would define some skill attainment levels that show how well are you in that skill. So it went away from a black and white checkbox kind of way to let's focus on the skills that are needed for your role and having it more individually. That would then define your career level. There were still, of course, certain generic requirements that you have to fulfill in order to become a senior, to become an expert Scrum Master, and so on. But it changed the whole conversation. It went away from individual accomplishments that you have to tick off to what are your skills and how you can grow in your skills.
Can you give me an example, like just to try to make this concrete, like maybe a contrast, like how one of these checkbox items was then later on incorporated into more of a skill and then the skill development aspects?
Sure. So I can give you a good example. One checkbox that we used to have in place is facilitating a retrospective beyond your own team level. So either together with the client or with several other teams included. So what we were actually after is you should show proof your experience with facilitation, but thinking about it deeper, it's not necessarily important with whom did you have that and in what context. It's important that you show examples. How did you improve in your facilitation skills? So one skill in our skill profile is actually facilitation. And how you argue for being experienced there or being an expert, it's more open, if you will. So it's not necessarily anymore about the specific thing that you have to do and tick off the check mark. It's about fostering the underlying skill. In this case, it would be facilitation. And I have plenty of other examples where we would do the transfer in such a way.
Let me try to see if I understood. So the original checkbox item was I facilitated the retrospective with the client as an example, just here. But then when you moved into the skill-centric approach, then it was about how you as an individual and also a Scrum Master have developed your facilitation skills. So I could talk about that I have, facilitated, like, for example, a project retrospective. We were just talking about that earlier in the week. Or I have facilitated a retrospective with a client. Or it could also be I have facilitated a workshop with other Scrum Masters where we try to come up with improvements for the process, as an example.
Absolutely right, Vasco. So you see, you have just much more possibilities to grow in your skill and in your level, because
and I can also decide that's a good point that I was just thinking, because then it gives the freedom to the individual to decide how they want to develop that skill.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. And we noticed exactly these kind of limitations with the checkbox approach. Another example is that you should pitch a project to a client. First of all, not many have a chance to do that. There have to be some lucky circumstances that you get to do that. And also not everybody is actually passionate about doing that. So we do have now skills that would refer to that, like communication skills, presentation skills, and so on. So we leave it much more to the individual on how do you can make an impact in our organization and in our team, and in such a way that it's tied with your actual passions and what
that's
you actually want to do.
And that's actually a very good point, because I've worked also in career path development with HR departments. And one of the things that we always end up with as an anti-pattern is like, we already know what all the others should do. And that's just plainly not possible, because everyone is in a different context and they have to exhibit also maturity to find out what is it that is important for me in that context, right? And when we have this list of achievements, as you described at the start of the story, then we're kind of funneling people instead of motivating them to be better.
Absolutely right, Vasco. That was one of the big benefits that we were after, which was especially important for people who grow towards senior and more advanced Scrum Master, because I, as a manager, I don't want and I cannot even feed them with every specific thing that they should do in order to grow in their career. It's often more the other way around, because they are experts in some area where I'm not so familiar with. So it's up to them to find out ways to improve upon their skill, and also how they can make an impact in our organization and in our team in a way that it's much more aligned to what they can do and what they are passionate about doing.
Yeah, it also gives them the responsibility, the ownership, which is,
exactly,
of course, a core aspect of growing professionally. Thank you for sharing that, Armin.
Thank you, Vasco.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role. We'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. to you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.